Hello, my name is Mariya Farooqi. I am a pharmacist at the Center for Integrative Psychiatry. Today, I'm going to talk about the thyroid, a tiny gland in your neck that does have a huge say in how you feel every day. And if you've ever been told your thyroid test is normal, but you still don't feel right, this talk is really designed for you. I promise to keep it in plain, simple language. You don't need a medical background necessarily to understand this presentation. My hope is that I equip with you with certain knowledge that you'll be able to apply to your own thyroid test and how to ask your own physician to look further into your thyroid function. How many of you or someone you know have sat in a doctor's office and described feeling exhausted, this extreme fogginess, or this feeling of cold in a warm climate, or just feeling off, and have been told your thyroid is normal? I can say this has happened to me. And I wasn't imagining it when it happened to me. These symptoms were real. And so this webinar isn't about whether something's wrong with you. It's about whether the standard test is telling the whole story, because a lot of time it really isn't. What you will walk away in this webinar: why a normal thyroid test can still miss a problem. What is it that we still need to investigate further? How our body switches from an inactive thyroid to an active thyroid, how it switches from a storage form to an active form, and which nutrients and habits that actually help or hurt our thyroid health. I mean, this is important for me to impart this knowledge onto you because I don't think this conversation happens enough when we discuss habits and certain nutrients that actually can have a significant impact on our thyroid health. And then lastly, I do want to talk about very briefly on how our thyroid can affect our mood, energy, and focus. So you don't need to memorize anything, but if you leave this webinar with understanding of these four things, I think we've got it. I think we're doing good. Okay. The thyroid is often called the body's thermostat really engine. It's really a super vital organ considering how tiny it is. It sets the speed for everything: the energy I have for the day, how I burn the fuel, my temperature, my focus, my heart rate, and mood. And that's why thyroid symptoms are so scattered and sometimes so easy to blame on stress, perhaps perimenopause or aging, right? So I want you to consider, besides aging and stress, could it be my thyroid dysfunction? So as a practitioner, when I see a constellation of symptoms or a pattern of these 10 things, my mind goes to thyroid dysfunction. So this is from my lens. I look for fatigue, weight gain, menstrual irregularities, edema, this like feeling of swelling or bloating, muscle aches and joint pain, the one we don't often think about, or we connect to thyroid health, constipation, sluggish gut, depression, hair loss, and dry skin. That's the biggest one we see in women, along with cold intolerance. So you might notice somebody is wearing a sweater or a cardigan, or some warm clothes when they're stepping outside, or somebody who needs to, really wear all the layers of clothing, like their scarf, their hat, their gloves, and their coat, while you're just wearing a coat outside. So that can, make us think about thyroid dysfunction. Okay. And notice how scattered they are. You can see nearly every system is affected, right? And each one gets blamed on, again, stress and aging, or just life, or this is all the most common one. Well, this is how my genes are. Well, if you put them together and a pattern shows up, and that pattern is worth investigating properly. Okay. Now, this tiny organ sets the pace for nearly every cell. Okay. It sets the pace for energy. how you burn fuel, temperature, focus, heart rate, and mood. I think I covered this slide already, so I need to go to the next one, which was this one. And then no, I'm going again. 6. Okay, there we go. Okay. Now, the usual test measures a signal, right? The TSH, not the whole system. So when a prescriber or provider checks your, or the lab ordering physician checks your thyroid, they usually are checking for TSH, right? Which is a thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, this standard test is like a thermostat setting, the request your brain sends to the gland, thyroid gland. But a thermostat setting asking for heat is not the same as the room actually being warm. Think about it. The thermostat setting that you set it at, asking for the room to warm up, is not the same as the room actually being warm. TSH gives the instruction to the gland, but it doesn't directly tell us how much of the active hormone is actually reaching your cells. Now, before we dig in, here's the whole chain in one picture, right? So I would like you to imprint this in your memory as much as possible. Your brain sends a signal called TSH telling the thyroid how much to make. The thyroid mostly makes T4, the storage form. Your body then converts that T4 in one of two ways into T3, the active hormone that runs your energy, mood, focus, or into reverse T3, an inactive break. Keep this simple, keep this map in mind, and today everything will be focused around this one. Thyroid health is really in 4 steps. And if we keep in mind of these 4 steps, you're good. Making the hormone. Am I making the hormone? Am I activating it? Am I delivering it to the tissue cells? And are my tissue cells able to accept the thyroid hormone? Because that always doesn't happen. The TSH, when we just check TSH, is mostly checking whether the first signal looks right, whether my brain is communicating to my thyroid. And if that signal is okay, then rest we should assume should be okay. But till we don't dig into the labs, we don't know. Because steps 2 through 4 can go wrong, even when step 1 looks perfect on your lab paper. So we'll spend some more time on step 2, the activation part. Okay. This is another slide I would like to remember. So your thyroid mostly makes T4, a stored inactive form we already talked about. Your body has to convert it into T3, the active hormone your cells can actually use, can act on, and where the biological change can happen. But the conversion can go 2 ways, the active road or the inactive road, the red color road, right, into reverse T3. When too much takes the detour and goes down the inactive path, you do feel tired and foggy, even though your TSH may look normal, okay? Or your T4 may look normal. That one step right here is where many people get stuck. Okay, so what pushes T4 down the inactive road? What makes the T4, express more? And sorry, what makes the T4 go down the inactive road? What makes the reverse T3 express more? Four main things I want you to remember, and there are a few other things. Ongoing stress. It could be psychological or perceived stress. It could be physical stress. It could be infection. It could be illness. It could be radiation therapy. Any of these pressures can activate where the reverse T3 is expressing a lot more. Even under eating or crash dieting, eating not sufficient amount of calories required, also not having enough sleep. Now, these aren't really exotic diseases. These are modern life stuff, right? So stress, we can never dictate when stress comes and goes. We can't dictate how our sleep is going to be at the end of the day, right? But the important thing to know is you have control over some of these parameters. You can be more mindful of your sleep. You can be more mindful of how you eat, how many calories you're eating, and you can be mindful of how to build stress resilience. Now, this is a full thyroid panel that I wanted to show. This is a fake one. I just made it up. Okay. And this is, and here's what it looks like on a real full thyroid panel. Okay. This pattern, what I see is quite common. So read down the status column. TSH is high. So the brain is clearly asking the thyroid to work harder, saying, well, we need more of the active T3, so it keeps on sending a signal. So I usually tell people, the louder the signal, the higher the number, because your brain is really telling your thyroid gland, hey, please work harder, do something, work harder, right? Now, if you can see, the free T4, the storage form, is perfectly normal, it's within range. But look at free T3, the active hormone. That's the one I want in optimal range, but it's below range. And reverse T3, the inactive form, is hard. So you can say the raw material is there, but too much of it is taking the inactive detour, and the active hormone your cells need is low. If your doctor only ran TSH, you would see one mildly high number and maybe a recheck in a year. The full panel honestly tells the whole story. Now, this is a common one, right? So say perhaps you're the one who's taking 100 microgram thyroxine, levothyroxine, which is a T4 only thyroid pill. So here's a case that you often see. So pay attention to this. On paper, it looks great. TSH is perfect, so she's told she's optimized, but she's still foggy. Her hands are always cold, and she's told it's not a thyroid. But I want you to look closer. The free T3 is still low. The pill fixed the number on the reports, therefore making TSH look great, but it doesn't fix how she feels, because she's still complaining that she feels foggy, her hands are always cold. And that gap, normal test, but real symptoms, is exactly what this presentation is about. So I want you to consider, I have symptoms, or I know somebody has symptoms, but the TSH is normal. Are we really digging in further? Now this is an important slide, and something which helps us appreciate about these reference ranges, and it's more of a technical point, but it does matter, so bear with me. The 0.4 to 4.0 range everyone uses on a lab panel is a population statistic, perhaps based on somebody who may not look like me or you. It's where most people fall. But your own TSH has a genetically set point that barely moves within you. So a result that's normal for the population can be a real shift for you personally. So when I looked at the population data, when I dug in a little further where this range came from, I found that the people who were screened to be able to be in this range did not have, they were not screened for any goiter or any high antibodies. So, which shows to me, if they had any antibodies to their own thyroid hormones, which shows to me that you can have an autoimmune disorder where there could be some antibodies attacking your thyroid gland, but still have a normal TSH. So there was another study done where they took out people who had antibodies, and when the population was studied, their TSH range was much narrower. And I find that intriguing. Okay. So this cutoff, what that we have, 4.0 upper cutoff, may be too permissive at this point. Now, since I talked about that, I should talk about how the immune system gets involved. And so far, we talked about how much hormone you make and activate, but there's a separate question. Is your own immune system involved? Antibodies are technically proteins your immune system normally makes to fight germs. Sometimes, though, the body makes antibodies against its own thyroid, and two show up on blood tests: TPO, thyroid peroxidase antibodies, and it's a key enzyme that thyroid uses to build hormone. And then there is thyroglobulin antibodies. Now, thyroglobulin antibody is the protein it builds hormone from. The key point here is these don't measure your hormone levels at all. They are totally separate, but they're a smoke detector for whether your immune system is targeting the thyroid gland. As I mentioned in the previous slide, you can have a normal TSH, but your immune system could still be attacking your thyroid gland, and you won't know that till you ask your ordering provider, lab ordering provider, hey, can you please also check my TPO antibodies and thyroglobulin antibodies? It's a bit of a mouthful to say. Okay, but what does it mean if antibodies show up? So, okay, say my antibodies are marginally high. What does it mean? It means four things. First, they're often an early warning. They can appear years before the standard TSH test becomes standard TSH test moves. Sorry, there's a lot of mouthfuls here. Second, they point to an autoimmune pattern. The most common cause of an underactive thyroid is Hashimoto's, which is clearly immune driven, and antibodies are playing a big part. Third, and this ties back to your theme, which is of the theme of my presentation, you can have positive antibodies with a perfectly normal TSH, and that can still explain how you feel. If you the brain fog, the cold intolerance, the weight gain, constipation. And the last one, the most important, having antibodies doesn't guarantee you will develop thyroid disease. So not everyone who has antibodies, and we do see it when I do order it, I do see some people have antibodies, but they don't have any of the symptoms. It doesn't mean you will develop thyroid disease. So if you're more mindful of diet and stress and inflammation, the numbers can come down. Now, it does raises the odds, so it's worth tracking over time. So I do recommend tracking, and it doesn't serve for us to panic, just track it. And this is exactly where the things we are about to cover: monitoring, nutrition, and calming inflammation. So the building blocks, what are the building blocks of the thyroid hormone? The building is done by an enzyme called thyroid peroxidase, or TPO. Now, iodine is the raw material that gets built in, and iron matters a lot because TPO is a totally iron-based enzyme. Again, TPO is an iron-based enzyme. Low iron literally slows the production line. It slows the assembly. It slows the production of thyroid hormone, which is why iron deficient folks so often have thyroid symptoms, even with normal looking labs. So you can have an awesome looking TSH lab, but the ferritin is low, right? And if they're coming with symptoms, then that is an indication for you, hey, they don't have the material or the building blocks to make the thyroid hormone. Then protein, especially the amino acid tyrosine, is the backbone the hormone is built on. And then is selenium, that protects the gland from the oxidative sparks, like the inflammatory sparks that get thrown off while the hormone is being made. Now, where does selenium come from? You'll find out soon. And so low iron and iodine can quietly cap how much thyroid you produce, and sometimes before the standard test ever moves. So I think you've got a pretty good appreciation what I am trying to say here. Now, this is the whole map on one slide. It can be overwhelming. I hope you can see it okay. And I'm not going to read everything. The point is simple. At every step, there are things that help and things that can get in the way. With anything in life, there are things that can help you and there are things that can get in the way. Making the hormone needs to go in the right direction, needs right nutrients, which is in the navy arrows, right? And gets derailed by stress, toxins, infections, even COVID, and autoimmune infections, any autoimmune diseases. In the middle, the T4 splits in the middle, the fork, the T4 splits two ways. Selenium and zinc push it towards the active T3. So hopefully in this presentation, you will have an idea of being more mindful of selenium and zinc in your diet if we want a better thyroid functioning. While stress, low-calorie dieting, inflammation, illness push it towards the inactive reverse T3. And at the bottom, even good hormone levels need the cell to respond. So say my TSH is great and my thyroid gland responds and it makes enough amount of T3. I am at the higher end of the range. But how do I know if my cells are responding? Right? Because my tissue cells need to have the receptors to be able to accept the thyroid hormone. And three factors predominantly are the main factors that help with receptor binding: vitamin A, adequate intake of vitamin A, zinc, and exercise where you actually feel, that you are breathless. So if you want to take a photo of any slide, perhaps this one. Okay. No. Okay. Now, the nutrients that really power the thyroid gland. And again, the same ones I've been mentioning: selenium, real star here, right? Where's selenium found? Brazil nuts, right? And then iron again. And then iodine from your seafood, sea vegetables, right? And then zinc. Zinc supports both conversion and the immune system. And we need to get enough of this, not extra. So I don't want you to go and buy yourself an iodine bottle or take extra amount of selenium, because that can also backfire. That can also cause excessive hair loss, right? So you want to get just the enough amount, not too much. Okay. So this slide is just indicating to some of the sources. Selenium, great. Brazil nuts are great in selenium, one of the highest food source that is rich in selenium. Then we have seafood, sea vegetables like kelp, kombu, seaweed, eggs, sunflower seeds for iron. We have red meat and dark poultry. So when we say dark poultry, I mean the legs and the thighs. Lentils and beans, leafy greens like Swiss chard or spinach, tofu, tempeh. These are really iron-rich sources. If you do tend to lean more towards vegetarian sources of iron, I do emphasize the need to add vitamin C-rich fruits and vegetables, right? So then iodine, right? Be mindful of your seafood, sea vegetable intake, seaweed, dairy, iodized salt, or even sea salt. We don't want too much, right? So again, I emphasize, please don't go out and buy some iodine drops, because sometimes that can tilt us towards the toxic side, right? Then there are zinc, pumpkin seeds. I tell you, pumpkin seeds in my life has been a game changer for my health. Chickpeas, cashews, tofu, and again, seafood. Okay, and habits that support, right? So this presentation wouldn't be complete till I express to you what habits support thyroid health. And really, I mean, in none of this talk, I will talk about supplements. I'm talk about food. I will talk about food and habits, because if we don't understand how habits and food impact our thyroid health, then leaning on supplements is going to be even more hard for us to understand our thyroid health. So habits that support it: sleep, protecting your circadian rhythm, right? Knowing when to wake up, when to sleep, not having this like disturbed sleep pattern. And then lowering the stress load, right? Finding out how can you develop more stress resiliency, and how to down regulate, how to find time where you are just not doing anything, where you don't have many commitments, you are resting and relaxing, and then eating enough. This is a key, especially for women, right? And I find we have some cases where, in the hope of losing weight, we have a situation where they're not eating enough food, or under eating, not eating enough calories, and that can tick the thyroid gland off and can cause thyroid dysfunction, right? And then moving, not necessarily just like going to the gym and doing HIIT training all the time, moving. So especially the ones who express to me, I feel constantly tired, I do not recommend some intensive strength training or high intensive training, I say consider yoga, swimming, gentle exercise, Pilates. And the important thing is maintaining these habits over time. Consistency is something I really like to emphasize more than doing it once a week and then taking the rest of the week off. Okay, and then thyroid hormone powers our brain as much as our body. And when thyroid shifts, people often show up as how they feel. So they could be low or have anxious mood. They can have deep fatigue, brain fog, unwillingness to get out of bed. And people are often told it's the burnout, it's the stress, perhaps low cortisol, it's all in your head. And sometimes it can just be the thyroid. And hopefully in this presentation, you will understand how to look at a thyroid panel, how to understand it, and if your mood is connected to your thyroid functioning. Because it's worth considering a look before you rule it out. Okay, now I do want to share with you how to ask your doctor some reasonable questions to ask your doctor, because you don't want to self-diagnose. You want to work in partnership with your primary care doctor. So just ask good questions. Hey, if my symptoms continue, can we look beyond TSH? Can we look at my free T3? Can you look at my receptor sensitivity? Could iron, selenium, and iodine matter? Can we check for antibodies perhaps? Could my stress or perhaps my dieting be affecting my results? Make it like a partnership with your doctor, because your symptoms are the real data, honestly, right? TSH is part of the picture, but the symptoms are a real data. And the best picture comes from full labs, your symptoms, and a partnership. Okay, other labs I do recommend you consider beyond the thyroid panel itself. Full iron panel, because low iron can make activating thyroid hormone harder. Vitamin D, and check for vitamin D, which is often low in autoimmune thyroid disease, and it keeps the immune system balanced. With any autoimmune condition, I do recommend keeping an eye on the vitamin D level, considering a celiac panel, because autoimmune thyroid and celiac disease travel together far more often than people realize. Food sensitivities, this is important, which can keep low-grade inflammation running, right? So rule out any food sensitivities. No, before testing, like, hey, do I react more to certain foods? Then SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which can fuel inflammation, cause imbalance in your microbiome, and can block nutrient absorption. And which really, as I emphasized enough, your thyroid depends on certain key nutrients, right? And then do consider a heavy metal test, since mercury, cadmium, and lead can interfere with thyroid function. Okay, the last piece of the workup, your metabolic health does matter, because thyroid and metabolism are two-way street. Glucose, insulin, A1C, and insulin resistance are associated with altered thyroid signaling and can shift the conversation and tissue sensitivity. Liver enzymes also, because liver is a major site of thyroid hormone metabolism, not the thyroid gland, the liver is. And certain conversion from T4 to T3 is dependent on liver health. So your liver health affects how much of the thyroid you make. Also, lipids, because low thyroid can drive dyslipidemia, and metabolic dysfunction can worsen thyroid signaling in return. Okay, so the point is, you can't fully read the thyroid without reading the whole metabolic picture without it. Okay, so before questions, well, this is a pre-recorded webinar, so there will be no questions. Let's boil it down to 4 things. 1, a normal on a thyroid test doesn't always mean you are fine. It's a signal. So a normal TSH doesn't always mean you're fine. It's one signal, and doesn't tell the whole story. Second thing, what matters is whether your body turns the storage hormone into the active one. And number three, the nutrients and everyday habits generally matter and do move that needle towards better thyroid health. And lastly, how you feel, your energy, your mood, your focus is the real information. Bring it to your doctor and ask the next question. And these are my references. I'm happy to share them, full references upon request. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to see you at the next webinar next month.